questions in the education era, and this one says 486 teachers have migrated this year from Jamaica, double the amount from the same time last year. What strategies, measures will be implemented to ensure retention?
Yeah, I mean, I can't vouch for those numbers, but the reality is that our teachers are being lured, encouraged to migrate. UK and other countries, US as well, I believe, provide opportunities for teachers because there's a shortage here, and obviously they're offering a better package. So we have to be, I think, quite aggressive in designing a response to that. Senator Damian Crawford, who is our spokesperson for education, has a number of ideas about this, including things like giving a motor vehicle concession that gets more valuable the longer you stay, debt write-offs for student loans for teachers who stay in the system, prioritizing them in the allocation of houses that are developed by the National Housing Trust, and various other things. You know, improving the teaching, the teachers' room, the room where teachers congregate at school, you know, to make it as comfortable and for them and so on. So just generally trying to, and also their salaries need to be adjusted. One of the tragedies, I think, of this recent public sector wage transformation, which has doubled the public sector wage bill, but you know, it's increased by $200 billion. But one of the challenges of it is that, you know, the persons in the middle, the rank and file, teachers, nurses, and police officers, really didn't do very well out of it. They got a 20% increase over 3 years, when inflation, as we all know, has been raging. So it hasn't really, I think, worked for them. The persons at the top have done extremely well. And of course, the Prime Minister and the ministers, they did, you know, 200 to 300%, me included, by the way, because but I mean, I told them that to my mind, it was unconscionable to be awarding the political leaders of the country such a huge increase when the public servants, who were really the ones who were bearing the low salaries in the public sector, and you know, they got such modest increases, and I didn't. You know, so I was very upset with the way that was done, and I think most Jamaicans were very upset about it. And I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, this transformation has just not had the kind of impact that it could have, because you know, people just didn't relate to the way in which it was done.
Thank you. Alvin, you have a question?
Yeah, we have two questions as it relates to the diaspora,
Yes.
and they're both asking, what would we be doing? What plans are there for voting from abroad? What plans are there for voting from abroad? And any plans for having Jamaicans and diaspora voting in Jamaican elections?
Right.
The second part of that is that why do investors who have businesses and homes not allowed to own licensed firearms when they're in Jamaica, when they're returning to Jamaica?
Well, just to take the second one first.
We cannot hear the question.
The second one was to do with licensed firearms and why are persons who have businesses who return to Jamaica, why are they not able to get a licensed firearm? And I'm not aware that that is the case. You know, the Firearm Licensing Authority looks at the applicant. They have certain criteria that they apply. You have to show that you have a place to keep the weapon safely at home and that sort of thing. And they obviously check your background to make sure that you don't have a serious criminal record and that kind of thing. But once you pass those hurdles, you ought to be able to get a licensed firearm. And I don't think it should matter whether you're dual citizen or anything of that nature. On the bigger issue, which is the voting, it's a complicated matter because the rules as to who can vote in Jamaica are in the Constitution. And the provisions that deal with that are what we call deeply entrenched provisions. They can't just be amended by an ordinary majority vote. in both houses of parliament. They have to amend them. You have to, that legislation amending those provisions has to be supported by at least 2/3 of both houses, which means the opposition has to support it. And then it has to go to a referendum. We've never had a referendum in Jamaica since independence, right? So just bear that in mind. We had one in 1961, which was to do the federation, and every government since then has, I think, said they don't want to endure that experience again. But, you know, obviously we're going to have to confront that because there are things in the Constitution that need to be fixed. I mean, the rules in the Constitution around eligibility, for example, to be a member of Parliament, where you can't be a citizen of a non-Commonwealth country, that I think is out of date, obviously, and needs to be fixed. And that is something that is being looked at now, and I believe will be fixed in due course, so that you know, we won't have this out of date differential between Commonwealth and non-Commonwealth persons. So that I think needs to be addressed. But one of the challenges with this is, you know, because we have a constituency-based voting system, in order to vote in Jamaica, you have to be registered in a constituency, and you have to be resident in that constituency to vote, at least on the voters list with a residence, whether you live there all the time or not. So in order to accommodate the diaspora in voting, and given that we have as many Jamaicans living outside Jamaica as live in the country, I think we would have to have some special arrangement. For example, I believe France has a situation where the non-resident French voters can vote, and they vote for us. They have a constituency of their own. And you know, so we could look at, for example, having a diaspora constituency that would, the voters in the diaspora would elect a representative to go into Parliament, and that person would be able to sit in Parliament as the 64th. I think we should have an odd number, because you don't want to have a potential for a tie. So yes, maybe we'd have two. But that sort of thinking needs to be considered, because I don't think, as a practical matter, it can work where persons, you know, another 2 million people vote in the constituencies. Because it wasn't designed really for that kind of system. I think if we're gonna do that, we have to have a different system than the one we currently have.
So to piggyback on that,
Yeah.
what about the Senate that is appointed?
Right. Well, I'm on record as saying I support the idea of the Senate being expanded and to have at least 2 representatives from the diaspora in the Senate. And you know, I think that's something which would help the Senate to broaden the voice, that collective voice of senators and the experience of senators. And it's consistent with the idea, the notion that Jamaica is more than just a geographical location, but is a body of persons and a culture and a lifestyle that goes beyond our borders. So I would like to see that happen. But again, the provisions that would need to be changed to make that happen are deeply entrenched. So we're going to have bipartisan support for it to go forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Alvin, anything
Fit for
more?
purpose, they're well designed. They need to be supported with adequate resources, and there needs to be no political interference in what they do. And what we've been seeing recently is politicians expressing an intent to weaken them and to take away their powers. And that certainly must be resisted as much as possible, because this issue goes to the heart of our identity, our sense of hope, and the future prospects of our nation. So we can't deal with this in any kind of diluted or weak way. We have to be very resolute about it. And I'm committed to that. And as I've said before, leadership is critical in this area. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister is in a situation where he is somewhat compromised, because his own declarations, which are supposed to be certified and published in summary form, as are mine, his have not been certified or published for a number of years, and we do not know why. And he hasn't been able to explain publicly what the issue is. So, that puts him in a difficult position, really, to speak with any authority on tackling corruption, because he himself hasn't been able to pass muster.
So, Leader Golden, let me ask you, while they're gathering some more questions here, what is your opinion on King Charles ordering the government of Jamaica to pay the attorney's fees for the Privy Council case? I mean, it's all tied into this whole constitution, and we have a whole ministry dealing with that.
Yeah.
And where is the constitutional reform, and what's your position on those things with the King as head of state and the Privy Council being our last court of?
Well, we have been committed to decolonizing Jamaica from 1938, and we continue to be. And so this idea that our head of state is the English monarch, the British monarch, in this day and age, sitting there in London, it just doesn't resonate with our reality. And of course, we have persons who are, we have some people who are very conservative and don't want to see any change. But I think the vast majority of Jamaicans realize that we have to have the confidence in ourselves, and as Marcus Garvey would have taught us, we have to prepare to just chart our own destiny and believe that we can govern ourselves effectively. And that means to me, not only taking the step that Barbados took a year or so ago, where we have our own head of state that is elected or chosen through a process which we have designed as Jamaicans, and is somebody who is a Jamaican. But also our final court shouldn't be the King's Court in London, which is fundamentally inaccessible, because you can't go to England as a Jamaican without a visa. Right. And many people don't get through when they apply. And it's very expensive to apply for a visa, and it's very expensive to go to London and litigate a case. So what we have is a final court which hardly hears any cases. And so our jurisprudence is being stymied. It's not developing as it should, with the role of a final court that hears regular appeals and charts the law of Jamaica in the way that it ought to be charted. So the Caribbean Court of Justice was set up over 15 years ago. It is well designed. It is insulated from political interference because it has its own funding. It has a trust fund that was set up at the beginning, where the member countries, including Jamaica, borrowed money from the Caribbean Development Bank and put that money into a fund, a trust fund, to support the operations of the court in perpetuity. And those loans have been paid off. So the fund is there in place, the court's operational. The choice of the judges is by a regional judicial services commission, which is non-political. The bar associations of the different islands and other stakeholders decide who should be appointed to the bench, to the judiciary in that court. And over the 15 years, it has developed a very excellent reputation as a court that hands down first-class rulings. So I think it's a shame that Jamaica is still stuck with the Privy Council and is not using the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, as our final court. We use it for trade disputes under the CARICOM Convention. It has jurisdiction over that, and we use it for that. And in fact, some of you may remember a case that was brought by a young lady called Shanique Myrie, a Jamaican who visited Barbados, and when she arrived in Barbados, they dealt with her very shabbily and didn't allow her entry. And she took them to court, and that was a case brought under the Treaty of Chaguaramas, the CARICOM Treaty. And she was successful and won her case and was awarded, I think, 50,000 Bajan dollars as compensation, which the Barbados government paid. So, she got justice, and the CCJ judges came to Jamaica to hear that case. So she didn't even have to travel or pay for her lawyers to travel. So, to my mind, we're missing a big opportunity. Guyana, Belize, Dominica now, Barbados, and St. Lucia's just signed on to it too, are all using the CCJ as a final court. And I've said to the government, we don't want to approach this matter of constitutional reform in a piecemeal way. We want full decolonization now. We want to have a Jamaican head of state, and we want to have the CCJ as our final court, a court which Jamaica helped to design, helped to fund, and there's there's a Jamaican judge on the bench there and so on. So that is our position on the matter.
We have a number of questions on protecting Jamaican assets, but they all lead to what is your position on the issue of public access to beaches in Jamaica? And this other one, which ties into that, says we have seen a trend for Jamaican assets being bought out by foreign enterprises. How would you deal with that?
Well, certainly the issue of beach access has become a very vexed issue in Jamaica because with the investment, the significant investment that has come into the tourism industry, we have reached a point where most of the beaches in Jamaica are basically under the control and ownership of foreign-owned hotels. And although the law says that the beach itself, which is between the low and high water mark, is public land, and anybody can go on that, you can't get to it because the land to access it is privately owned by the hotels. And if you go to Jamaica, unless you're going to pay and stay in a hotel, you're going to find it quite difficult to find a beach, a nice beach to go to, which is really tragic.
Yes.
And it's not the model that has been used elsewhere in the Caribbean, where, tourism is also a major part of the economies there. Barbados, for example, anyone can go on any beach in Barbados. So we are committed to reforming this in a way that would ensure that the Jamaican people have access to beaches. The Beach Control Act, which exists, has provisions in it where the government, the state, can negotiate for rights of way over private land to have access to the beaches. And the owners are entitled to some compensation for that, which has to be assessed in a fair and balanced way. But there are mechanisms in the law for achieving access, which we will have to use if we can't negotiate an acceptable solution to this. And those beaches which are not yet in private hands, but are not in good condition and so on, we would like to spend some time and care and attention to upgrade them and make them accessible to people and so on. I think every parish must have a very nice beach that our people can go to and feel comfortable and breathe out. And the other issue about assets, sometimes there's a role for foreign investment to help develop something. I'm thinking, for example, if you look at some of the highways that have been built in the country, we wouldn't have been able to build that road network without the benefit of partnering with international partners, whether it be the French, who helped to build the east-west toll road, or the Chinese, who built the north-south. So I'm not against foreign investment, which is on terms that benefit our people. What I don't like is where we, through some kind of less than transparent process, find that assets that were formerly ours are suddenly controlled by persons who then want to kind of provide, exclusive rights to who can go in and who can't and so on. And we've seen that with the beach issue. So this is something which we have to be very aware of, and I believe it's important that any assets that have been enjoyed by the people of Jamaica must continue to be enjoyed by them. I've from time to time have visited, there's a place called Old Pera in St. Thomas, which is a pristine natural beach, which the communities of Old and New Pera, which is very rural St. Thomas, they have always had access to that beach, fishing and swimming, and I visited, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It's unspoiled, and private persons bought up the land around it and put up a barbed wire fence, and were telling the people that them can't use it again. We had to step in and make a fuss about it. Turned out that they hadn't paid their property tax for many years. And of course they backed off and said that's not their plan. But that wasn't what they were saying before the attention was brought to the matter. So we have to be vigilant to stand up for the people.
Okay, this next question is very current because it's addressing the recent local government elections. And this person says, the PNP is heading the KSAC. What's the major, I'm trying to be concise. What are you going to do to clean up the city? And then it talks about the recent Don Anderson poll that shows the PNP leading by 8%. But this person says there's a number of undecided voters. What are your plans to swing them, the undecideds?
Okay,
in relationship to the KSAC and cleaning up the city.
Right. So we now, there's a new mayor of the corporate area, Andrew Swavey, and he has entered on a reference of trying to deal with the problem of the city being very nasty and dirty. And he's established a new committee and brought key stakeholders on board from the private sector and also state agencies. And he has Joan Gordon-Webley, who was formerly the head of the National Solid Waste Organization, under the JLP actually. He has brought her, she's now a member of the People's National Party, and she has a lot of experience in sanitation, public sanitation, and she's helping to drive that process. So, he's giving it his all because it's a big issue in the city. Part of the problem is the infrastructure, especially the sewage infrastructure in downtown Kingston is old and is really on its last legs, and it's going to take a lot of investment to fix that. And it's a problem. It's a problem in my own constituency where from time to time you see sewage water bubbling up and running on the road, and it's absolutely awful. And that happens downtown a lot, right by KPH there and by the market, Coronation Mart, all of it. So this is something which needs to be prioritized, but it's not the KSAC that can fix that. They don't have the resources for that. That needs to be a central government issue, And so it's a question of making that a priority and getting it done. On the other issue, how are we going to reach the undecided voters? Well, first of all, I think that their number seems to be shrinking. So that's a good thing.
That's true.
And for me, it's a question of reaching out to them. Meeting with different sectoral groups, the teachers and nurses, the police. I met with the trade union leadership the other day, met with the churches, the Jamaica Council churches. Just being very accessible and having discussions, talking about the issues. And, hopefully encouraging people to be positive about the future and want to participate. Don't stay on the sidelines and criticize, but get involved, and criticize from the inside and be active.
Yeah.
And I believe that, if we could engage in that way, and then of course I have to continue to be on the road, which I have been. I mean, I've spent the last 3 years really being out and about a lot, and getting to, because I wasn't very well known when I became leader of the party. Although I'd been a minister and all that, I was in the Senate and I was a somewhat technocratic kind of person behind the scenes. So I had to go out there and let people get to know me, and I've been doing that, and I'm going to continue to do it.
Thank you. So you mentioned in one of the answers about the sewage situation and KPH.
Yeah.
So a major issue for people in the diaspora when they want to think about going home is access to healthcare and the healthcare facilities that are there. Now we know we have the best doctors and the best nurses out of Jamaica. Just go to any hospital in South Florida and you will find them.
Yeah.
But what about what does the opposition plan to do in order to deal with these crumbling infrastructures and the poor healthcare facilities that exist in Jamaica?
The issue of how the budget for health is being spent is a real issue for us, because what is happening now is that the government is on a major spending binge of expansion of various hospital facilities and so on. And we know from experience that that is a problem in terms of corruption, because if you look at Cornell Regional Hospital, which is a major hospital in Western Jamaica, that was supposed to be renovated at a cost of $2 billion. And how many years later, 6 years later, it still can't finish, and the budget gone over $20 billion. Yeah, and and there's been no accountability for that, none. So, when we see these big expenditures in health on new projects, it's of concern to us, because we don't like the way they manage those projects. But furthermore, the basics are not being attended to. What do I call the basics? The experience of the average Jamaican when they go into a public hospital and they need treatment and they need to be admitted and they need a bed. Many times they can't see a doctor for hours to be even through the triage process, and then they can't get a bed for days. And many of them have to be on a wheelchair or on a bench or lying on a cardboard or whatever. Yeah. So to me, the priorities must be to make the experience of the patient, the public, in dealing with interface in the public health system, treat people with dignity, so that when they go into hospital, they have an experience where they feel that they are being properly looked after. And so the resources need to be allocated in that way. And of course, we also have to focus on some of the chronic diseases that are a problem, hypertension and diabetes and cancers and so on, which are lifestyle influenced, and continue to encourage people to eat healthily, take adequate exercise, don't smoke, etc., etc. And that public health messaging around that needs to be reinforced. But it's a question of prioritizing. I think in terms of the diaspora's needs, we have, apart from the public health facilities, we also have private facilities as well. And we have some good ones, and but again, I think it's work needs to be done. I think there are opportunities for diaspora investors to look at maybe enhancing one or two facilities to the standards which they would expect to have the benefit of if they were here.
Right.
And there's some of that happening, and I would encourage more of that.
Well, we have time for one more question. Okay. I know it's
just warming up.
Yeah. One more question. Dave.
Okay, we do have quite a few questions, but what we try to do is put them together by subject matter. Okay. So we could, So this last question says, what would be the first thing on your agenda when you become Prime Minister next year?
Excellent. That's a very good question. I think the governance side of things is very important, and to set the right tone for the way in which we will govern the country. So for example, the parliamentary committees, we need to get to the point again where the opposition chairs parliamentary committees and can hold the government of the day accountable. I think that needs to be reinstituted, and that I would want to do from day one. Apart from that, I'm really focused at the present time in building our overall program of what we're going to do in terms of education, in terms of violent crime, in terms of agriculture and so on. And we're working hard on finalizing our policy platforms for that. And then in terms of the sequencing of how we roll them out, we want to do the most impactful things that we can as early as possible. But I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that just yet, because it's a little early in the day, and I find the other side like to take our ideas and run with it. And don't give us no credit. But you know, we're very much focused now on our policy and programmatic framework of what we want to do.
Everything for you.
Thank you for answering the questions. I'd like the audience to know that if you didn't hear your question read, we plan on giving the leader all the questions that were generated by the audience this evening, so he can see where the major issues are for the diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dale and Alvin. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Mark Golding.
The next Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Without any idea of what the questions were going to be, can you tell that this gentleman is prepared? For an hour, answering all these questions that are of concern to us in the diaspora. And I would like to thank him very much for agreeing to come to this event, and Mrs. Golding for your role and your part that you've played for 40 years, but 34, and continue to play in supporting the leader of the opposition. Thank you so much.
Well, I can only endorse those last remarks about my better half. Thank you, babes. But to each and everyone who came tonight, thank you so much for coming, for spending some time here. It's been a good opportunity for us to share ideas and hear concerns, and I very much appreciate the time. I want to thank Delia and the team who put this together at relatively short notice. And to thank our hostess, I think it is.
Yes.
La Veranda. Yes.
Michelle and Paul
yes.
La Veranda.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I just close by inviting everyone to continue to keep abreast of happenings back in Jamaica and to play the role that you play, which is very important in holding us accountable as persons who put ourselves forward to lead the country. It's arrogance and complacency are unfortunately all too easy to slip into when you're in a leadership position, and we have to try and avoid that. When we have people keeping a close eye on us and asking us tough questions, that helps to keep us grounded and focused. I thank you for that. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'd like to call the team who just worked non-stop. Marva Wilkes. Marva, thank you so much. I don't know what she's going to do without the... I know she's still working. We're finished, but she's still checking in people. Thank you so much. Oliver Falloon Reed. Oliver, where are you? Thank you. Junior Farquharson, where are you, Mr. Farquharson? Thank you so much for your assistance. Marie Hodgson and John T. Hodgson, thank you so much for cooperating with us. And also to Alvin Lane and Dale Telfer, thank you so much. And I also must thank my husband. There's no me without him and his support. So thank you so much, Glenn. So we have provided some snacks in the back room for you. This is also a full restaurant and a full bar. So I would love for you to support our fellow Jamaicans at La Veranda who have opened up for us to be here tonight. And music will be provided by Maestro DJ Mark Swaby. So it's a party, people. Have some fun.